Pilot Boys in the building. Welcome to the Pilot Boys podcast, where you'll get the real on all things sports, music, and pop culture. I am Mecca Don here with my co-host V.
Mamba mentality for life.
Today is June 25th, 2020. Thank you guys for tuning in. I know you could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. We are still quarantined and social distancing due to the pandemic, but we're still going to figure out a way to bring you a show at all costs. On today's show, we will talk to Maurice Bobb of Bleacher Report's NBA and breaking news team to get some insider information on the different possibilities of an NBA return, The Last Dance, Golden State Warriors, his time in the Army and thoughts on Kaepernick, what's happening in the country, and much, much more. Shout out to our Patreon subscribers. Remember now that our Patreon subscribers will get our episodes on Wednesdays, a night early. These donations help keep our show going. If you want to help keep us on air, you can donate at www.patreon.com/Pilot Boys Podcast. And don't forget to grab some wristbands at shop.pilotboys.com. And be sure to leave us a 5-star rating and comment on Apple. Let's go.
Where the Pilot Boys at? Let's go. Pilot Boys, we get on up. We don't fly, boys, we get up. So Pilot Boys, we get on up. We don't fly.
You're listening to the Pilot Boys podcast. We are here with a very special guest, Maurice Bobb of Bleacher Report's NBA and breaking news team. Maurice, thank you for joining the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well as I can be. I'm looking like I need to change my name to Quarantine or Corona Reese Report or something. No haircut, no. I'm just wow.
Yeah.
I never really realized as a man how much, I guess, maintenance and upkeep you need, but I'm living proof. Yeah.
and how easy it is when you are in quarantine to say, you know what, I'm just not going to do it.
Just screw it. I mean, who's going to see me anyway, right?
Yeah. If it wasn't for this show, I probably wouldn't have had a haircut by now. So, but yeah, we're going to jump right into it, man. You have a very interesting story. Obviously, you've done a lot of different things in your life at such a young age, very accomplished, and actually different walks of life too, not only just the same thing. So we want to talk to you about a lot of that stuff. We're going to start kind of by just talking about your journey, though, your journey as a writer. So V can jump in from here, and we'll go from there.
All right, sounds good.
What stands out always about you is that you're eclectic, right? Most people focus in on one area. You are brilliant in the sense that you are able to navigate both the worlds of sports and music as a writer. So that's probably my first question: is how did you get into the idea of writing, and then how did you decide that you were going to basically do sports and music? Because most people don't try to go down both paths.
So I'll bet if everybody listening, if you could go back in your life and pinpoint, you'll see that somebody or teacher, parent, relative, friend, somebody told you what your talent was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a similar story. You know, I remember I was going to Bowie State University in Maryland. I had just gotten out of the military. And the policy was, if I wanted to be a full-time student, I need to be on campus, living on campus in the dorms. And I already had an apartment, I was a grown-ass man. So, I wasn't trying to hear that. So basically, I had to write a brief paragraph as to why that I should be allowed to live off campus. And I remember, obviously I can't remember what I wrote, but I wrote I made my point. Mm-hmm. And, the guy who was also a professor, he said, wow, you made your point so, succinctly and crisply here. Did you ever thought about being a writer? And, that kind of went in one ear and out the other. I was just glad I didn't have to live on campus and,
right.
I could just do my thing. But I remember just kind of reflecting back on that moment, like, wow, okay, I wish I would have, heeded that advice at the time. So I became a writer late in life. I got started just kind of writing for free in various local newspapers, like a Defender here in Houston. Other places like that. And then my major jump was into the Houston Chronicle. And I wrote about community news. So I remember there's a story that stands out that Boy Scout troop, they built this awning at their school because students were getting wet going from one building to the next when it rained. Mm-hmm. So they was like, okay, well, why don't we build an awning and that'll solve that problem, So just little stories like that to kind of highlight the little known, a little man, kind of give them some breathing room. And my foray into sports came with covering high school sports. So at first I was a statistician, so I would go to games and write down how many touchdowns, yards, whatever. And then I broke into the writing, and I remember my major breakthrough was covering the Yates season where they were blowing people out by 100 points. And I don't know if you recall that. They made national news. They were doing full court presses and keeping your team from scoring. They were beating them, blowing them out by 100 points. It's crazy. But that little time, I followed them for the whole year. And the thing about sports writing in real time, especially for a newspaper, like right after the game is over, they expect the story, to be written and live so people could read about it and comment and either yay Yates or screw Yates or whatever they want to say. Right. So I had to learn on the fly to write two stories. So at halftime, I'd have if this team won story or if this team lost story. Oh, wow. And I'd build both stories and then just kind of, at the end, I'd say, okay, this team's going to win, and it's just kind of plotted out from there. And then from there.
What's funny about that real quick? You could probably release like alternate history with all those other stories that never got published.
Yeah.
That'd be funny,
right? It's crazy because as soon as the game's over, the editor's constantly texting you, calling you, where's the story? Right. Like, shit, so I had to come up with a way to make sure I got the story in on time. But that was a great lesson for me to write quickly, succinctly, get my point across, and, not dilly-daddle with how I'm going to say it or what have you.
I think that
the training ground.
And not to pause you right there, but I think for me, in as I've gotten to know you and read your content, both obviously on social media and the stuff that you publish, is what I think is your greatest talent, is that you're able to get your point across in very, very few words, right? And you make complicated points very, very efficiently.
Oh, cool. Appreciate that. And then with the Chronicle kind of getting notoriety, my name just started getting passed around. And I remember you guys probably know Daytwan Thomas.
Yep.
Editor extraordinaire. That man has touched a lot of careers, and he touched mine. He got me my first national article in King. Wow. So I started writing for King. Rides. I was an editor at large for Rides magazine. Scratch. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah, I remember.
You wrote for everybody in the culture.
And then obviously Slam is under the same umbrella, so I moved over to Slam with Ben Osborne. And I had a great time, a lot of history writing for Slam. And then Ben Osborne went over to Bleacher Report. And that's how I found myself at Bleacher Report. And, kind of here and there, I've done stuff from Rolling Stone to Complex to Vibe to, you name it. Your name just kind of gets passed around, and people that you've worked for or worked with, they take editor spots and they call you up, hey, I got the story, so it's kind of one of those things where you develop relationships, and if you do good work, your work will speak for itself, and you'll get called on to do different things.
Talk to us about Bleacher Report too, because Bleacher Report is a phenomenon, right? I mean, they have officially dominated and taken over the game in a lot of ways. And I remember years ago hearing about them, but it was more of kind of like, I think like a fan kind of contributor.
Yeah, fans were just submitting
like Yahoo Voice type thing. And then all of a sudden it just started dominating. What is it, I guess, that you've seen kind of about their culture, or maybe even the business model that makes you think, makes them kind of come to the forefront like they have?
So I go back, to the kind of writer that enjoys seeing your name in print, like physically holding the copy, holding the magazine and looking at your name in there. So I think for a model like Bleacher Report, they were the first and very early adopter of online and making sure they get social. So for like Instagram and Twitter, they would combine a writer and a comedian and a graphics person to work together and collaborate and get out great content via Instagram, Twitter, and so forth. And that generated a lot of, people, they love the memes, they love the content, they love the videos, or whatever the case may be. And that built its own momentum from a grassroots standpoint. And then they were able to bring over very prominent writers, Howard Beck from New York Times and, people like that. So once you bring on writers to that pedigree, that's going to give your brand some significant footprint and foothold on the industry. And, from there, like you got House of Hoops and, all these other little offshoot Instagram accounts and so forth and so on. They build their brand from a social media standpoint. And I think that's where it's going because like me, I used to reading magazines and things in a physical nature, but this generation, they want to look at it on their phone and they want to see graphics and the latest slam dunk or, that's how people like Zion made it to prominence because they want quick highlights and a quick snippet of what's, what it is. And and I think Bleacher Report really hammered home that particular model. And that's why it's so popular.
Yeah, even in sports, right? Like people don't sit through 2.5 hour basketball games. They'd rather watch highlights. And it seems like what Bleacher Report understands is that they move according to the market. And I think that's why they've kind of moved ahead of a lot of the other platforms that still kind of rely on those traditional methods. They seem to understand the market and the changing dynamics of the market much better than some of the older entities.
Yeah, and then you could literally not watch a game and just keep up on Bleacher Report's social media accounts, and you can feel like you watched the game because you got the major hits, the major top plays, the slam somebody made, or the great pass somebody made, or the game-winning shot, whatever the case may be. You'll get that in real time, so it's almost like you did watch the game. And,
how is that kind of changing landscape that you're noticing? How has that changed your approach to writing and producing content, if at all?
So, when I started out, my thing was long form content. So if I had a article in a magazine, it'd be like 5,000 words or, 2,500 words at the least. Now you don't want to go over 800 words with a piece online. And typically you want to stay around the 500 word to 600 word mark. And I remember with MTV News, it was even shorter, maybe 500,
Is that because people's attention spans are shorter now, pretty much? Is that
I think that, but what people don't understand too is kind of what kind of shifted the market too was the introduction of the blog. So now you got the crowd all writing and they have various degrees of talent. They might not be able to write at all. They read some of their stuff and like, okay, who told this guy they could write? But with so many blogs and competition for information, now you want to get things out quickly and you don't have time for the long form. You want to get it out, as soon as possible or right after a game or right after a play, whatever the case may be. So that's part of the whole breaking news concept. You want to get it out. You want to be first, but you also want to be right. You want to be concise. You want to have sources and things like that. And one of the kind of the rubs against media these days is, the clickbait argument. You put these things in the headline. I can't tell you how many times when I've submitted a story and I even go back and look at it and like, ooh, who came up with this headline? It's very clickbaity or just kind of picks one juicy tidbit out of the whole thing. And, that's kind of one of the things where I got in trouble with James Harden and his mom. I wrote a story about his mom, but it pinpointed a couple of negative things and, just kind of, he wouldn't talk to me for a little while because, she was kind of upset about it. But, I think, readers or listeners should know that writers don't necessarily have any kind of input on the headline that goes out. And especially from a social media standpoint, because people are trying to get clicks and things like that. So you might have one headline on the actual story, but if you look at it on Twitter or social media, it has a different, headline, a more eye-catching, clickbaity type of lead in. So that's kind of one of the things that's made us look bad, to be honest. But you try to affect what you can. So,
but it seems like that's a media culture issue that you guys are dealing with, right? Like, it seems like there's a battle between true journalism and this idea that we need to put something out that's going to get the clicks and results, right? And it seems like the clicks and results come before the story now in a lot of mediums, and that seems to be the general issue that we're having, even in terms of these clashes that we're having in public, is people are only reading the headline. They're only reading the 15-second clip, and obviously that's creating a unique set of issues. Has that changed? Is that something that you see in your world from editors? Are they changing too in how they approach stories?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to follow the money. So in traditional, publication, you would have ads in a magazine or in a newspaper. Now those ads are attached to the social content. So in order to get a certain amount of dollars, it's not like, okay, they put out a $5,000 ad on a paper. Yeah. Now the ads are driven by clicks. Mm-hmm. So you have to be able to, deliver the footprint and the schematics on how many people clicked, how much time they spent on a particular link, and so forth.
The music industry, the radio industry changed that way too, with what songs people would decide to play. It really came down to the money that they were able to get from advertisers, and people had to stay on your station. So it seems like that's happening across all industries a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I think we're kind of in the middle of the pivot. So it's going to be some mistakes made because you're making decisions on the fly and you're trying to figure it out. And that's across the board. Even now during COVID, businesses are having to pivot. Okay, should people work from home? What's this Zoom thing about? All these things trying to keep productivity and things to a high level. And so you're going to make mistakes. And, I think, from my industry, there's been a lot of mistakes made. I still don't think it's too late to fix things and get things back to where, we have integrity and people really have a lot of trust. But then now things are magnified and louder. So many people have voices and opinions. And like you said, they make opinions based on snippets and headlines. They don't even read anything. So it's just all this sort of noise to drive home this wedge between the information we're trying to get out and the actual receivers of the information. They don't trust it. They don't trust it before they even get a chance to read it or think about it.
Right.
So
you mentioned opinions, and I think that's actually a good segue because we want to get into some substantive NBA stuff, and you have opinions of what's going to happen with the NBA. Are they going to return? You have you hear stuff about Kyrie's opinion, and you hear stuff about Lou Williams and KD and all these different people coming out, and some of the stories you're hearing are like, based on things that they're saying, and then there are things that you're hearing reported from a conference call and all this type of stuff. What is your impression, kind of just as a person who's involved with the NBA, on what's going to happen this season, and what the percentages are within amongst the players in terms of who really wants to play and who actually doesn't want to play?
So I think one of the important points to kind of remember or remind people of is the world didn't necessarily, at least in America, things didn't really shut down until the NBA shut down. Mm-hmm. If you go back, once they realized some players had it and they canceled that game and the NBA shut things down, then you start to see across the board, okay, all of these companies started to shut down, stay home, all these other things. So the NBA kind of led the charge in that regard. So this is an opportunity for them to lead the charge in the coming back portion as well. I think Adam Silver's done a great job with putting together a plan that's going to be somewhat conceivable because, the goalpost keeps moving. We don't know anything about this disease or, how it's going to affect people. And, there are various degrees of, susceptibility to it. When you look at the NBA, you have the players, they're healthy and everything else. But what about these coaches who are older, front office people who are older, training staff, all these other people who are ancillary personnel around the actual league, how they might be affected. So there's different, pockets of accountability for the players as opposed to coaches and things like that. And so that and then when you take that and put it against where we are right now as far as trying to get social justice and the voices that have been magnified. And actually, we're seeing changes in real time. And I think players are leery of stopping that momentum. So I see that part of it. I get that. You know, at the end of the day, money's great. Your career is great. Trophies are great. Championships are great. But, you know, a lot of these players have kids and, you know, they want to make sure they leave the world a better place for their kids. And their kids don't have to struggle like they did or face discrimination in whatever form like they did. So I can see the kind of battle within themselves as far as, okay, do I come back? Yeah, I want to chase a championship, and yeah, it'd be great to give people entertainment and kind of bring some levity, you know, bring some lightheartedness into the levity of the situation. But then there's like, okay, well, if we bring all this attention to the league and everybody's watching, does that mean they're going to stop paying attention to, you know, our protesters and the voices we're trying to amplify and the causes we're trying to amplify? So it's a very fine line and double-edged sword. But at the end of the day, I think, you know, the NBA will come back. It's just a matter of when. I think, you know, with the Kyries and the Dwights, you know, they make very strong points. But I think they would be satisfied maybe if the NBA was able to push it back a little bit. And so as opposed to starting July 31st, maybe mid-August, and that would maybe give them some sign, okay, well, now we're giving it more time for the protesting movement to have an expanded platform to kind of get some things across. And maybe we can get a few more things across the finish line, and maybe that would help, you know, alleviate, you know, your concerns in that regard.
Real quick, if that happened, would they push the next season back, do you think? Or you think
they'd have to?
Okay. All right.
They'd have to. Right now, you know, they don't. If you notice, the day of the draft is still kind of up in the air. They're kind of looking at October, but you know that's still in the air. So a lot of these things are kind of based on, okay, what's the immediate, you know, outcome? When are we going to actually have a season? And I think we've gotten past the point where we're not going to have one. We're going to have one. It's just a matter of when, what players are going to show up. And then that's gonna be a huge, you know, point of contention, because should the top players decide not to play, and that's their right, you know, whether it be due to COVID or due to, you know, the protesting and civil unrest, regardless, if they don't show up, now that takes away from the actual, you know, the pot of talent and, you know, what people want to see, and will it be an asterisk next to whoever wins the championship and things like that. So it's so fraught with, you know, various complications.
And the disease itself, right? Like what happens? What happens if LeBron James contracts COVID during the middle of the Western Conference Final? You know, like those are things that have to be thought about as well. But I did want to kind of key in on what Lou Williams said, right, about this potentially being a distraction. And we're kind of at the point where this is able to have the platform it has because a lot of the distractions that Americans normally have to kind of avoid these serious issues aren't there. So it's almost like it has elevated the opportunity for the message and this movement to have life, right? What do you think about, there's a debate, Mecca and I have had this debate as well, about whether it's more powerful for them to come back and use that huge multi-billion-dollar global platform to consistently fight for change outside of playing the game, or is it a bigger sign to say, you know what, we're just not going to play basketball. We're not playing until you guys resolve this issue. I wanted to see where you kind of fell on that spectrum, or what you believe.
So I kind of believe more so that if they didn't play, it would have more of an effect, because you have people clamoring for any kind of, you know, break from, and not just, you know, the civil unrest. You know, people have been out of work. They've been stuck at home. Their anxiety levels have been very high due to the, you know, fear of this virus or uncertainty when it comes to, you know, what it might do, how it might affect people. And there are, you know, real consequences. You know, I have 4 family members that had it. 2 of them had to go to ICU. They, you know, they lived, thank God. But, you know, there are people who didn't live, like Carl Anthony Towns' mother, you know. So there's some very concrete examples of the severity of this, time we're living in. But, I think what it would do is if they just say, okay, we're not coming back until X, Y, and Z, that would put pressure and it would also put pressure on the owners because you have to remember the NBA owners we have some of the richest owners in all of sports. Yeah. If you combine the collective wealth of all of these teams, you're in the upper hundreds of billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Steve Ballmer himself is worth over 50 billion. Mm-hmm. So and his team is in high contention for a championship. Yeah. So he's going to want to get back. He's going to have impetus to do so. So if players put the impetus on the owners to say, hey, look, we need you to go to bat for us, and we'll come back if you help to facilitate these changes and this legislation and this, these points and so forth. I think that would move the needle a lot faster than if they came to play right away. Even if they use the platform to say, for instance, halftime, they had some sort of special, players talking about various issues and things like that, or if they knelt before games and so forth, that's going to ignite ire on the other side. People, I don't want to hear what LeBron James had to say. Shut up and dribble, just play the game, because you have those people. They're out there in droves. And,
let me ask you this, because you just mentioned kind of player leverage, essentially. And we talk a lot about college, and, we're seeing unprecedented kind of actions from different collegiate athletes across the country who are essentially understanding now and realizing their leverage. Part of it is because of momentum, right? And they feel supported behind a movement, right? That I think some of these issues they were aware of obviously before now, but now that they feel like they're supported, they feel like they're part of something. Mm-hmm. And obviously the NBA players have an even next level of leverage because they got money, so they can literally quit and be good for life right now if they want to. How do you feel like this kind of movement we're seeing amongst athletes, does it have staying power? Is this something that you think is going to actually, what's happening now is actually going to change the landscape of sports forever from a leverage standpoint? Or do you think that this is probably maybe just kind of a flash in the pan because of the movement itself?
Well, it has a danger of being flash in the pan, but I think leverage comes from also power. So in the case of the Oklahoma State, his best player is the one who raised the alarm and said, "Look, I'm not accepting this. This is going to have to be changed." So you saw right away he came out trying to put that fire out. So I think that's what it comes down to. When the best players with the biggest platforms and the biggest voices, when they speak up, now they have no choice but to listen. These coaches, their livelihoods depend on having the best players. Yeah. And that's also they're gonna think about their futures as well, because if they can't keep their best players happy, forget about recruiting. You're gonna have to be able to field a great team in the future. And what does that mean? You're gonna lose your job as a coach because you couldn't put together a winning team, a winning record, so forth, so on. So now players really have the leverage, and also more people are listening. Mm-hmm. People who had never listened or understood or really recognize what was happening before, now they're seeing it. Now they're willing to step out and say, okay, it's not enough to say I'm not racist. You have to be anti-racist. Mm-hmm. You have to be anti-discrimination. You have to be anti, police corruption and police brutality. You have to be take a stance. You can't just say, oh, well, you know me. I'm not racist. You know me. When I see wrong, I wish wrong didn't happen. That's not going to fly anymore. Now there has to be action. You have to speak up. Use your voice. Use your platform. Whatever that may be. And if we can, put together that kind of momentum, we'll see real change, because that's where true leverage comes from action, from standing behind your convictions, that old freedom or death, it really comes down to that, and I think a lot of other African Americans are seeing that injustice for us also can mean injustice for them if they let it, grow and multiply and get worse. And they really see that in the police community, so I think, the groundswell has been growing, different voices are seeing. And I think, V made a good point. We're all stagnant, and we were forced to see what happened to George Floyd. We're forced to see all these various, things that we could turn a blind eye to. Oh, we're busy. Oh, we're working. Oh, we're out. We're having fun. We're drinking. We're hanging with friends. Oh, I'm just too busy. You still on that? We can go still. Now there's no turning away. And there's a lot of power in kind of making everybody stop. And even from a different standpoint, with the world kind of standing as still, smog disappeared in LA. Animals are coming out, you know what I mean? It's like the world is healing a little bit. And this can be a time where we could heal if we pay attention and we take action.
And I wanted to ask you about this, and Mecca and I have talked about this as well, is two things. What do you think the obligation of one, people in power is, like NBA owners, NFL owners, baseball players? And then the second thing is, what do you feel like white America's obligation is to this cause?
So I think it all has to start with acknowledgement. And for too long, they've, pushed the can down the road. They didn't want to face it. You'll see it all the time. Oh, you talk about slavery, forget about that, But then you say 9/11, never forget. So it's almost as if, never forget the atrocities committed against us, but forget all the atrocities that we committed against others. They want to sweep those under the rug. So, from, the white community and people in the power like that, they have to own their shit. Realize that you want to see the power. Realize that there really is such a thing as white privilege. Not because you necessarily see it. You might have grew up poor or whatever else. But I bet you if your name was on a job application and a black person's name that, might have been Mustafa on the actual job application, your resume is going to get more looks and clicks and likes, and people are going to call you up for that job, even though y'all have the exact same GPA and things like that. So there's privilege on all levels, and you have to acknowledge that. You have to go back to the Constitution. It was literally written by white men only for white men. Even white women couldn't vote, So, and we still to this day have that, and we've just ratified it and added amendments and things like that. But the actual document is still what this country is founded upon. So you have to think about that systemic ideology that permeates through everything. Even when you look at our government, there are only 3 African Americans in the whole Congress. What is that? There should at least be 13%, or 14%, where we are as far as African American representation. It should represent how this country is set up. And we have too many, quote unquote, old white men making decisions. And even though we're in 2020, these old white men probably still look at things as in 1960, 1965, when their formative years, when they made the bones of who they are and how they think and how they view the world. They may tell you one thing and give you lip service, but you best believe they're hanging on to their ideals and their beliefs that, form themselves as an adult.
That's a great point, because I think a lot of the things that I think now, obviously I've grown and I've learned, but the foundation, you're so right, happened in high school or even before that. You know what I mean? So most of my beliefs on how the world works and what I guess my place is in the world hasn't necessarily changed since then. So I agree with you 100%. Let me ask you this though, actually 2 questions. One is, I guess, what do you see now? I guess you could do it from the sporting world, or you could just do it from regular life. What do you see now as kind of the most troubling thing about this time period? And then the second question is, the flip side is, what do you see now as the most promising thing that you've seen during this time period?
So I think, one thing that kind of gets glossed over with this time period is mental health. We are a very social creature. And to be cut off from family, friends, you can't go and, hug your mom, hug your dad, or hug your grandparents, or grandparents can't hug their grandkids. The mental health is really declining. I have a 5-year-old, she's so close to her grandparents, and, she hasn't been able to hug them. And, I can see the pain in their eye, and I can see the pain in their eyes, So mental health is really an issue. And somebody like me, I can speak from personal experience. My anxiety levels have been extremely high. And that's just from a standpoint of, I don't want to get it. I'm scared to get it.
Right.
You know, everything is just so extreme. And I know I'm not alone in that, you know.
Right.
So one of the things that kind of gets glossed over, you know, outside of the unemployment and, you know, businesses, you know, tanking and things of that sort, and the uprisings and so forth, the mental health, you know.
I agree with you 100%. It's overlooked.
Mental health is really, yeah.
But now,
And it's one of those things, especially in the minority community, we tend to not seek professional help when it comes to mental health. And I saw a lot of momentum going towards that. And I hope people take advantage of that on the other side of this, because we're really going to need it, because, you know, it's not hyperbole to say a lot of us will have PTSD after, you know, this time period, you know,
I know I
losing jobs, or they might have lost a house, loved one, health, you know, because even if you survive this, it might, you know, alter your heart, you know, lung, who knows how long you'll live past it, you know, even though you've quote unquote recovered. So we really are at war with ourselves, with the environment, with, you know, racism, discrimination. We're at war with a lot of these things, and, you know, there's going to be a lot of PTSD. So I think that's one of the most overlooked negative aspects. One of the positives, I think, is you're seeing in real time. People are forced to have self-reflection. Okay, what am I doing? What means the most to me? I can say from a personal experience that, you know, I was a very, you know, growing up poor and having some success as an adult, I have grown very materialistic, you know. And one of the things I saw immediately is all of that energy and just sort of importance placed on that was gone immediately. I don't care about anything materialistic, you know.
Right.
And you know, not to toot my own horn, but I have some great quote unquote material things, and I don't care one thing about them. You know what I mean? And that just lets me know that, you know, I think I'm not alone, and it might just be materialism, but I think people have been able to stop, really reflect, and kind of really pinpoint, okay, what's important to me? What's important as I move forward? What's going to be my next 50, 60, 70 years of life? What impact am I going to make? And I think you're seeing that also in real time with these athletes. You know, before it was all about championships and my brand and sneaker deals, whatever. Now, okay, what about my kids? What about the impact I'm going to have outside of being an athlete? Does my voice really mean anything? And is it now time to you know, sit up and say something? Or what's the best way for me to do that? And that's why there's a lot of, you know, confusion on all levels, especially when you look at this sort of NBA restart. It's coming across the board. People are just really having self-reflection and really seeing what's really important to them in their lives and their families. And you know, we're seeing that across the board.
It's healthy, right? Even the NBA thing, I think some people are getting a bad rep, but it's healthy that they're having these conversations, because no two people think alike. Everyone's dealing with trauma, or there's a justification for why they hold their position. But I think it's a real opportunity for the NBA community to kind of embrace all of these different opinions and move forward. That's what we hope for as a country, right? One of the major issues that we have is that we all kind of stay in our own sandbox, right? In this situation,
echo chambers.
And this situation is forcing us to join all in the same sandbox. One, you know, in the spirit of understanding, right? I wanted to ask one more question. We have some NBA questions, historic questions that we're going to get to, but one last question that I have is this one. You have written and been involved in the NBA world for a long time, and have been a journalist. I would like to hear about your specific experience, right, as a writer, what you've dealt with in terms of race throughout your career, and how you've gotten to where you've gotten despite that, but some of the challenges you've specifically faced and you've seen other minority writers face that you haven't seen from your Caucasian counterparts.
So one of the immediate things was I came from a quote unquote hip hop journalist space. So your King magazines, your slams, if you compare that to, traditional media, you'll know what I'm talking about. And one of the biggest problems I had was making the switch and kind of going back and forth. And there was a lot of pushback from the voice that I developed. And I had to literally dial everything back, take a lot of my personality out. And I don't think I saw a lot of, my white counterparts, have to go through that. So a lot of my voice and opinion was kind of taken out. So it's funny. I have a mindset with whoever I might rewrite for, like, oh, okay, I'm writing for them. Okay, I can be me. I can write, free flowing, my voice, how I would, communicate. And if I were writing over here, like, okay, well, I've got to write at a 4th grade level, use words that everybody knows and just everything. And, like one of my editors used to say, kill your babies. You have to kill your babies on, for certain publications because, you can't be wordy or, use this particular language and so forth, or slang or whatever the case may be. And that's one of those things that's been a harsh reality. And like when you go into locker rooms and those kind of environments, you're judged by who you're writing for, I noticed. And there's this assumption that if you're a minority, you're not writing for a prominent publication. And I've even tested that. So a lot of times when you go into these locker rooms or back, to the back of the house, backstage, whatever the case may be, they'll have you wear your, your media lanyard around your neck. Sometimes I'll hide it in my pocket or whatever else and just kind of see how I'm perceived or responded to, just kind of say, okay, am I tripping? And more often than not, I'm not tripping. You're judged by that. And I don't see a lot of my white counterparts go through that. So I try to bridge the gap however I can. So, when you get in these media scrums, I try to make sure, my African-American counterparts who are writing for African-American publications, they get space. Make sure they can ask that question because they're just as important to get the word out, So you see it a lot. And it's not just from a racial standpoint, it's also kind of classism. Again, my publication is more important than yours or whatever the case may be. And you see that across society, I have a family member who's a doctor who thinks they're better than everybody because they're a doctor, And I think that's where we kind of fall short in our humanity. If your worth is only tied to what you do or how much money you make, we've already lost. You're missing out on so much, a vast, vacuum of knowledge and experience and everything else. We just don't value voices because they're not coming from prominent titles or, the most amount of money or status in society. And that's one of the things that I've tried to be cognizant about, just to make sure, I don't devalue someone just because they're stationed in life. Because I was that same person, Yeah,
I think you made a good point too, because and you kind of referred to this earlier too when you're talking about this time period, kind of slowing everybody down and making people start to reevaluate what's important to them, and even yourself in terms of material things. I think that's happened to a lot of people, and I'm hopeful, right? I'm, cautiously optimistic, I guess I'll say, that will carry over into society and further beyond, and we won't place such an emphasis on those type of things, and we will start to see the value of each individual and personal relationships and understanding and meeting new people and so on and so forth. So I think that when we talk about, what do I see now that's potentially hopeful, that for me, that is what I'm hoping for. I want to switch real quick though, because, I know you don't have a lot of time and I want to get to a couple other things. One of them is Isaiah Thomas. You grew up as an Isaiah Thomas fan. Is that correct?
I wore number 11 when I played.
Okay. All right. So, obviously this summer, one of the things that actually did become a distraction, which I think was probably healthy for a lot of us, was The Last Dance, right? The Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls documentary. And one of the things that obviously was like a storyline throughout that was Isaiah Thomas and the Dream Team and how he was snubbed and whether or not Michael Jordan had a role in it or didn't have a role in it. I guess as a fan of Isaiah and just as a basketball writer and person who's involved in the space, what did you think of The Last Dance? And then also, what did you think about, what are your thoughts on what actually really happened with Isaiah and the Dream Team?
And if
Okay, so
in one addition, and your thoughts on the player you admired versus everything that we've seen and heard from Isaiah since he left the court too.
So, spoiler alert, I was a huge Bad Boy fan, so that's why I hated Michael Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I hated him.
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
Were you able to respect him as you hated him? Or
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Because you can only hate somebody that's relevant. You know what I mean? And that constantly kills your dreams and stuff like that. So that's why I had such a visceral hate, because he was so damn good and we couldn't just get rid of him. Right. But I also really appreciated his game and everything. But for me, Isaiah was like a maestro on the court. He had the ball on a string. The things he could do, people talk about Kyrie and things like that. Isaiah is Kyrie's blueprint. Isaiah was the one who could come down, lose you and shake you and cross you, and he could score at will. Yeah. I mean, all I had to do was point to that 25-point outburst on a sprained ankle. I mean, the dude was unstoppable. He's won at every. I just used to love the way he would smile and just be a baby-faced assassin. He smile on your face and he don't look like he's 15, but man, he would kill you. Right. Kill you on the court.
That's how Steph is.
Yeah, 6 foot nothing, but man, not afraid to go in there, mix it up, take an elbow, and still finish on you and get through the contact.
Throw a few elbows too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And from Chicago, rough shot of Chicago, so ain't no backing down. Right. He was fearless, and I was never that tall, so I just really gravitated towards Isaiah. And I played point guard in high school. And I used to love to pass, and I was more of a defensive specialist. That's what kept me on the court and why I wanted a starting job. But I just loved Isaiah and the way he played, even on down to the shooting form. So I used to shoot like him. And I wore number 11, like I said, until I was part of a team where I couldn't get number 11, and I chose 34 for Charles Barkley. He was like one of my, I guess, my third best player. Favorite player. But as far as Isaiah, I was glad to see that people got to see the asshole side of Jordan, because he was painted as like, I want to be like Mike. But really, he's an asshole. And I met him before. He's an asshole. Wow. If you're not a woman, don't even bother. He'll talk to a cute girl or woman, but man, and some guy, no. Wow.
I heard
I've experienced it firsthand, and I've seen a guy,
telling you to fuck off. Right.
Yeah. And he's like that, and he may have, mellowed as he's gotten older. Yeah. But man, I met him when he was doing his Wizards tour, comeback tour. And wow, he was an asshole. But, a lot of people got to see that asshole side of him in Last Dance. And he finally admitted how much he hated Isaiah and the Pistons. And what's funny to me was Isaiah and the Pistons made him the winner he was. Sure, he was great. Next world.
He said Isaiah's the best point guard ever. He did.
And why would you hate to that degree somebody who made you as great as you are? I just don't understand that part of it.
You got your ass because they were literally beating his ass.
Yeah, it made him go be better, made him go lift weights, made him just push through and find this other gear. You know what I mean? It took him to a whole nother level. He still would have been great, probably would have still been the best of all time, but it took him those battles and learning how to win, learning how to overcome physical challenges, mental challenges, all of these things. And it's just unfortunate that he didn't see the value in that and carried such a grudge that he kept him off that team.
So you do believe he kept him off the team?
Yes.
Okay. But it seemed like by that time, Isaiah
100%.
Isaiah had burned bridges with Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, and even the person that spoke out about it was David Robinson, right? And he's not a guy that's outspoken, but he said, Isaiah, we wanted a team that was unified, and people just didn't like Isaiah or the Bad Boys because that was the culture that they presented, right? And you talked about Jordan being an asshole, but it seems like Isaiah's a pretty big asshole himself, right? So it's two assholes that are butting heads.
Yeah, but what I liked about Isaiah and the rest of the team and the Bad Boys were they embodied the spirit of Detroit. Mm-hmm. I'm from Oakland. We have that same spirit, working class, against the grain. Obviously we had the Black Panthers, a lot of fighting spirit in us. And I saw that same camaraderie and simpatico with Detroit,
Yeah.
And so they were just really beacons for their city. And that's why they were embraced in that way and so forth. And for Jordan to delegitimize them as champions when they had to fight the same kind of battle, they had to fight through Boston, they had to fight through LA, they had to learn how to win as well. Isaiah famously threw that ball and Bird caught the pass and, knocked him out, So he had to learn valuable lessons from his, peers and better players and so forth and so on. And that torch was passed to Jordan. And, the Pistons acknowledged it. Why couldn't the Bulls,
Right.
And I think a lot more has been given towards that whole no shake thing than really needed to be. And that's another one of the things why Jordan was so amplified.
Petty, right?
He was so amplified that everybody jumped on that bandwagon when just a year before the Celtics did the same thing. They didn't get the same ire. I don't understand that part of it, So it's like selective outrage,
What we saw was, do you think it was just one of those things like we knew that Jordan went out of his way to create competition and create adversaries for himself? Do you think, I think in a lot of ways, his ire for the Pistons is showing how much respect he had for him, right? Because he kind of
the same way I hated Jordan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He put that in his mind that the Bad Boys were the biggest threat to him in the NBA. To overcome that, he had to put them in a place where he absolutely hated them. And it carries over. It shows he still carries that same vitriol to every single person that he feels has wronged him in life. You know what I mean?
I have a question. I have a question too, Maurice, about you mentioned Jordan being the GOAT, and you kind of said that in passing. First of all, do you agree that he's the GOAT?
Yes.
Okay. And so let me ask you this question, because I'm curious about, now that obviously you grew up as a fan of basketball and now you actually cover basketball. And so I think you've been around basketball your whole life. So I want to get a sense of this. Jordan is the GOAT. And I think that as he was playing, he was respected as the GOAT by even great players. What do you think? How do you feel like LeBron is respected amongst his teammates? I mean, I guess even a couple years ago, and whatever we consider his prime, do you feel like he has similar type of respect amongst his peers in the league that Jordan has? Because I think when people talk about the GOAT argument, that is one of the subtle things that people don't necessarily mention, was that people were scared to play Jordan. Like all-stars, Hall of Famers were scared. I don't know if we saw that at the level that we did with LeBron, but what does your experience tell you?
So the one kind of, I guess, difference between Jordan and LeBron, because make no mistake about it, LeBron is a supreme athlete, supremely gifted, and he was one of those players where he had all the talent in the world, but he busted his ass too. Mm-hmm. You put those together, he's going to succeed. You know what I mean? Right, there are a lot of players that had so much talent that just kind of coasted their way. Not LeBron. Took care of himself, took care of his body. That's why he's in the 17th season. So he's going to have all the best stats when it's over, when it's all said and done. So from that perspective, he's got a really good shot at reaching the GOAT. The reason, the one thing that keeps him from that final push is his supposed lack of killer instinct. Mm-hmm. Now, and I can see it as kind of a basketball sort of purist or analyst or what have you. I've watched him shirk in important moments where I know a Kobe or a Jordan, or a Magic or a Bird, they wanted the ball. I'm taking the shot. I don't care what. Yeah, I'm taking it. I'm doing it. I'm going to win this game. And he has done it from time to time, but there's been times where he shirked it. He didn't have confidence in his free throw shooting ability, so he'd be afraid to take it to the basket in the crucial times and so forth, so on. And even he's getting lambasted for Kyrie hitting the big shot, even though he got the big block. It's easy to go get a defensive play. There's not a lot of quote unquote pressure on that because you're not gonna have to shoot a free throw you know what I mean? If you miss it or missed a big shot or what have you. So that's the one fine line that's keeping him from crossing that final threshold to being GOAT. But I think if he wins one for the Lakers, I think now it'll be very hard to keep him out of it. You know, it's going to be based on who you are and what generation you're in,
And what's
who your GOAT is. And there's no argument against it. If he wins with the Lakers, I really can't argue him not being. He's GOAT-ish or GOAT 2.0. He's going to have to share the something.
We've had this conversation plenty of times because I know you're also a huge Kobe Bryant fan, and
huge.
At this current moment, I still have Kobe over LeBron, right? And I say this because, yeah, he had the 3 championships with Shaq, but then Kobe stayed with the same team. Obviously, it's the Lakers, right? But he won 2 more without Shaq for a total of 5. And LeBron has, I think, 3, right? Do you think that why do you have Kobe over LeBron still? And then also, how much do you think the championship numbers matter in this discussion?
I think the championship number matters, but it shouldn't matter as much as people like to lean on. You know, one of those famous lines is, people like to use statistics, but liars use statistics. So you better make sure what stats they're really trying to use in their argument. You know what I mean? So, when you take the Jordan against LeBron, it's the 6 championships. Well, didn't Bill Russell win, 11? You know what I mean? So you can skew statistics in any way you want to. So I really don't lean too much towards the statistics, the championships anyway. I think to be in that upper echelon, you have to have won a couple championships. That's a must.
Yeah.
Okay. But beyond that, now it's breaking down to, okay, what kind of versatility did you have? And for LeBron, a lot of his versatility is in, bringing other teammates level of play up, things like that, getting people involved in the game. But Kobe Bryant's versatility was he was able to extend his career. He went from outside in. He went to go see he was one of the first players to go see Hakeem Olajuwon to get his footwork. So now he could add that to his game. He was always evolving and changing his game to where you could not stop him no matter what you did. Hand in his face. What's his name for the Rockets? He used to put his hand literally touching his nose to try to stop his shot. And Kobe practiced with hands in his face so he could still see and follow through and hit that shot. So when you have a player that's constantly evolving and looking to evolve to have these different dimensions where you can't be stopped, whether it's on the perimeter, mid-range game, low posts, what have you, free throws, you can count on him to ice free throws, all these other things, that's why I have him in my upper echelon of players. And also just that killer instinct. I'm sorry, but that's very important to me. I think you need to have it in whatever you do. You have to know, okay, I'm going to get this done. It's going to happen. I can't count on anybody else. I got to do my share. I got to step up. The team's, counting on me to write this story or file this report or sell this, whatever. You know what I mean? You have to have that killer instinct if you want to be successful in life. And I feel like LeBron kind of went and got some of that killer instinct from Dwayne Wade in Miami. But I don't think he would have ever won if he didn't leave Miami. He needed to go learn that killer instinct. He had everything else game-wise, but that killer instinct, he got some from Dwayne, and now he has, a good percentage of it. He doesn't quite have the level of Jordan and Kobe, but I think he's getting there. But he may run out of time, so to speak, because I don't know how many more years he has at his prime or playing at this level anyway. I think he's past his prime, but he's been able to extend it.
Right, absolutely. Okay, let me ask.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna switch gears. Go ahead.
Yeah, one last question before we switch gears. I was going to say that there's a lot more that we haven't covered yet, but we know that you're from Oakland, right? And you are a Golden State Warriors fan. Where you're at. One of the funny things that we always talk about is, one, where did all these Golden State Warriors fans come from, right, when they were winning? And then second, where did they all go? But you know, Oakland, anybody who knows the NBA knows the people who were in Oakland, they were diehard Warriors fans. That stadium was filled when
Run TMC, baby.
When they were winning 10 games, right? So talk to us a little bit about that as a fan. You know, how you feel about bandwagon fans and how real OG Warriors fans feel about all of the flash that came with the championship run.
So I don't have so much a problem with it as most other people might have. I think what the Warriors went through was kind of the Chicago Bull effect. So Michael Jordan brought in fans that otherwise wouldn't have been fans. He brought a level of excitement to the game. So a lot of people were diehard Michael Jordan fans, and then they became Bulls fans by default. You know what I mean? And I think the Warriors had the same thing. Steph Curry, he brought in fans that otherwise wouldn't have been. You know what I mean? He brought in the common man who weren't as athletic, but hey, I could hit a 3-point shot. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that kind of opened up the game and fandom to me. So because of Steph, the Warriors became a de facto favorite team, you know, for a lot of people. And I don't so much mind that, you know. I'm glad to see, you know, I was glad to see a lot of people rooting for the same team that I was, right. Even if it was for a short time, because I remember that wasn't the case, you know. I was pulling for Mitch Richmond, Chris Mullin, Tim Hardaway.
I love that.
You know, Run TMC, you know. I was too poor to go to games, but man, I was rooting. You know what I mean? I was rocking my Tim Hardaway jersey and proud of the team. Yeah. April Speedwell, Sleepy Floyd. For those that don't know, that boy was a killer.
He was nice. Yeah.
You know. And the We Believe team.
Yeah.
You know, Jason Richardson winning those slam dunk championships. You know, so it was great for me being a Warrior fan to kind of reach that mountaintop and get some championships up in there. And I'm okay that we're not there anymore. You know, I'm still a fan. I'm always support, but I understand that everything's cyclical. Right. It's somebody else's time. You know, whose time that's going to be, it remains to be seen. Yeah. But I'm okay with the fact that we took advantage of it. We slid some championships up in there. I'm okay.
Yeah. Especially
I'm a Raiders fan. We suck. I mean, suck.
The NBA has a lot of movement now too. That's different than it was, 15, 20 years ago. So guys are going different places.
Moving around,
it's hard to see 6 championships in a row and all that type of stuff nowadays. But I want to get to one thing also before we get you out of here. Something that's pretty important. Off the subject a little bit. You were a soldier, right, in the Army?
Yeah.
Is that correct? And so it's relevant. First of all, it's always relevant. Thank you for your service. Thank you. But it's extremely relevant now because there's a lot of talk around kind of the Kaepernick thing, right? And it's bubbled back up now that we're dealing with these protests and all these issues. And obviously the NFL has come out and reversed course, and now Goodell is encouraging teams to sign him and all this type of stuff. And one of the pushbacks, which I felt was illegitimate and whatever, but it was one of the pushbacks of what Kaepernick did, was that it was a slight to the Army and a slight to the armed forces, a disrespectful to them, and not knowing that it was actually Nate Boyer, who was a Green Beret, if that's right, who told him to actually kneel, right? So I guess I have 2 questions. One for you is, how do you feel as the Black soldier, right, and coming back to this country and dealing with some of the issues that we feel like Black people are dealing with in this country, including some of the issues that we're fighting for in this protest? And then the second question is, how did you feel about that framing that people were trying to do about Kaepernick kneeling being disrespectful to soldiers and people who fought?
Okay, so, I like to use personal experience. So I was stationed in Somalia, and I was part of the armed guard for the Swedish hospital. So every day, obviously Somalians needing medical attention would show up to the gates where we would allow a certain amount of patients in for the Swedish hospital to, give care. And, one of the things that really disillusioned me was as soldiers, when it was time to quote unquote stop the influx of patients, and okay, we had to ask them to leave, and if they didn't leave, now we have to use force. And to have to use force against people that I can literally see need medical attention. And I remember, and it's kind of fucking with me a little bit, I'm sorry. I had to forcibly remove a guy who was missing all of this, and you only see his teeth with his, mouth closed, and he had just, it looked like he had, come in contact with some shrapnel or something like that. And I had to forcibly remove this guy, knowing that he needs medical attention. It fucked me up for a while. And there was a lot of that I had to endure and go through. And it messed with me. When I came back, I was mad for having to have gone through that and do that. And for a long time, I wouldn't even say that I was a veteran because it would just drum up those feelings. And so now I could really understand the PTSD of other soldiers like me, like maybe a Vietnam or whatever, who had to commit atrocities against kids and families and whatever the case may be. And you put all of this on the line and you do things that you think are part of a moral fabric of you and what you believe in this country and so forth. You really see that we're not as, morally superior as we'd like to be. Our ideologies are very flawed, and some of the reasonings behind what we do, it really can be disillusioning. And so when you juxtapose that to what you have to face as a Black American soldier veteran in this country, you're willing to put your life on the line. You can go all the way back to what we're celebrating today, Juneteenth. There were literally soldiers, Black soldiers, who had to fight against their own interests, who did not know that they were free, who put their life on the line and died, not knowing that they were free. You know what I mean? And you take that to Drew Brees' comment where he tried to hide behind his grandfathers, and that's great. But what about the people who fought alongside your grandfathers, who came back to this country after fighting for freedom abroad, who couldn't get that freedom here, who were beat up when they were in uniform, who couldn't go vote, who couldn't provide for their families? Even as early as the Vietnam War, soldiers came back. White soldiers were giving loans with impunity. They were giving business loans with impunity, things like that. Black soldiers, no loans, no business loans. So now you see that trickle down to now where these people are dying off, and the white soldiers, they're leaving their grandkids with property, businesses, wealth. I had to pay for my grandparents to be buried. No insurance. I paid for it out of pocket. So that just tells you the disparity that still flows over into in the current day that people don't pay attention to or try to gloss over. So those are some of the disillusion that I saw as being a soldier, that we really aren't taken care of. And when you look at the medical community, we're not viewed in the same light as, white soldiers. They'll write us off, or if we say something's ailing, we won't get the same treatment. They'll push us out. Oh, you're fine. You know what I mean? So I can't tell you what kind of effect that's had over the course of all these years of being misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed because you're Black and they're not giving you the same medical treatment. So that's very disheartening from that standpoint. And then as a veteran, I look at Colin Kaepernick. I was so proud to have someone protest when I put my life on the line for him to do so. I literally went and fought in a war so citizens could hold this government accountable to give us the life, liberty, and freedom and justice for all that I supposedly fought for. And that's all he was doing. And it was a silent protest. And you had all this ire directed towards him when you look at the fact that now there's some rioting and whatever else. And it's not just us, there's some agitators and things like that. But now that the refrain is, well, why can't you do it peacefully? Well, Didn't we do that 3 years ago? And you call us sons of bitches, so, you can't have it both ways. And then also as a veteran, I find it odd that veterans aren't the ones who are saying, oh, well, you're disrespecting the flag. It's people speaking for veterans. Excuse me. I have a voice. I can speak for myself. Don't speak for me. Don't hide behind me and us and what we did and the sacrifices we made. Because I can tell you to a man, all of my veteran friends and compatriots and people that I still keep in contact with, they all are proud or were, supported Kaepernick kneeling because they understood what he was doing, and it wasn't against the flag. It wasn't against the anthem. And also, let's look at that anthem. Let's read the third verse. Why are we proud about an anthem that literally in the third verse says to catch and kill slaves? Why is that still, sure, we don't sing it, but it's there.
It's in the song.
It's the song literally. And so you want to hang your hat on that. So as a veteran, and I've said this multiple times, actual freedom is more important to me than symbols of freedom. People are getting caught up in the symbols, the flag, the anthem. Excuse me. We should be focused on actual freedom. Let's focus on upholding those virtues and values, and we could get somewhere to where now everybody would be proud to say, I'm an American.
Yep.
I'm a citizen of this country. Because why? I'm respected as a citizen. I'm appreciated as a citizen. I'm treated equally and fairly like a citizen. That's where we need to get to, because, and I hate this whole, if you don't love the country, then leave it. Okay, when you had issues and things like that, did we tell you to leave? Is that your first inclination, is to leave or give up or drop it? So if your kid comes home with an F, kick that kid out of the house and whatever. You got to work with that kid and get that F to an A. That's what we're trying to do with this country. We're trying to get an F to an A. We want to have an excellent 100 score across the board for this country. And it's going to take work. And it's going to take us standing up and saying something that's not going to be easy to hear. And it's going to be anger some people. But you have to have self-reflection and look and say, okay, how have I contributed to this discord? How have I contributed to the status that we're in? And people aren't taking that opportunity.
I wanted to focus in on one part of what you said, right? Which is, we tried to do it peacefully, right? When people criticize the riots and criticize some of the reactions, right? In this country, historically, has been built on rebellion and violent rebellion.
Tea Party.
Yep. And and Dave Chappelle brought this up. I know you've probably seen it as well, that at a certain point, that rage turns, right? And he was talking about specifically with the police brutality, that a lot of what happened in Dallas and then what happened later on in Baton Rouge was actually committed by soldiers, right? And specifically black soldiers. And you've alluded to that rage. Why don't you think that America understands that it's at that point now, right? That it's at that point where we're knocking on the door. We're knocking on the door. We're fighting for our equality. But now we actually literally have to fight. And why do you think that that's looked down on when Black Americans do that versus every other rebellion that's happened in America is glorified?
It just comes down to, like I said at the beginning, not owning their shit. They want us to forget what they've done, but remember what's been done to them. So now the highlight or the focus is being put on what they've done. And they don't want to, be called to the carpet for those things. And it's coming from us. We aren't in a seat of power, and they are. And it's very uncomfortable to have to face these things. So now you want to take the focus off the message, and then now focus on the messenger. That's why so many murdered unarmed Black people, they get tried in the court of public opinion on what they did in the past. What does that have to do with what we're dealing with right now? Just because they stole a snack when they were 15, that doesn't make them a bad person. You know what I mean?
Right.
I can tell you, I went to an all-white high school. There were literally 5 Black people in the whole school. The crimes I saw committed, but were never,
same.
They don't have rabid police officers coming in their community and arresting them. And I saw rape, drinking, vandalism, you name it.
Running from police, all that.
Yeah, but it's all counted as quote unquote mistakes. But we're over policed. So whatever mistake we made, we're gonna have to pay the price for them. And now the statistics are skewed because there's been more focus put on our community, and that's why. So, people need to move away from the messenger and focus on the message. What are we saying? Can you listen to that? Can you listen to these young people and how they're crying out that, hey, all of us should be treated equal. I see my black brother over here. They're not getting the same treatment or the right treatment or equal treatment, because it's not just us out there now. That's why this feels different. It's not just us. It's all different kind of communities coming together, and they're joining with us, and they're taking action. So they're not just, oh, I'm not racist. Oh, I'm anti-racist. And this is why I'm standing alongside with you to fight for you, because if you can come up, now we're all together up. And it makes a better life for all of us.
Well, I think, and it's like you said, and to put a button on this, I think it's been amazing to see all across the country, all the different communities that come together, even here in Ohio, some of the ritziest, whitest suburbs in Columbus, Ohio, Upper Arlington, and New Albany. I mean, they have hundreds of people come to these protests. And that's something that you just would have never seen before. And I think you made a very poignant point earlier, and B and I have talked about this before as well, is that people are starting to realize and I think this is something that, all human beings need to realize, that we're all connected. So what happens to me, essentially, is going to affect you at some point. It may not be the same direct effect, but energy, I believe in energy, and I believe that we're all connected. And then also, and this is kind of what Martin Luther King used to say, is that injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. Because once you allow injustice to happen, it's only a matter of time before it starts to happen to you. And that's what a lot of protesters are starting to see now in the streets, when they're getting hit and they're getting pushed down by police, or they're getting beaten with batons. They're like, wait, hold on, this is what's going on? And then also, like we said earlier, everybody's had to pause at this time period and kind of pay attention to things that they weren't paying attention to before. People are realizing that history, certain Juneteenth and different things were never taught to them. People are like, wait, and they're getting a whole re-examination of what this country actually is. Because what it was branded to be versus what it's actually been are two totally different things. I think a lot of people are coming to grips with that.
And to transition a little bit from sports to your experience in hip hop, right? That's the other thing that Mecca and I talk about a lot, is the type of value that Black Americans create for this country, right? That everyone gets to enjoy, but they don't share in the rewards, right? Hip hop culture is something that's been exploited for decades now, and the billions of dollars. As kind of a hip hop journalist, I wanted to kind of get your opinion on that, the hip hop culture as a whole, and how generally this country can give back to those cultures that they're being rewarded from and enjoying, right?
So, I see a meme kind of going around, I wish they loved us like they love our culture. Our culture is permeated from jazz to inventions, to music, to, you name it. A black man invented the stoplight, literally telling us to stop and go. So we have had so many contributions in this country that have been ignored or whitewashed, to where now hip hop has been whitewashed. Even so, if you look at it, the most popular artists are white.
Yeah.
And actually the biggest consumer is white. So we're okay as far as to listen to, but you wouldn't go to bat for anything that we really care about. You only care about, what we have to say over a tight beat. But forget about how things really affect our families or our lives and things of that sort. So there's been this sort of compartmentalization. So we're only for a certain amount of consumption or entertainment. We don't really have any real, so we become kind of this one-dimensional aspect of people's lives. Oh, we're just a rapper. Even if you go back to Do the Right Thing, they hated blacks, but their favorite athletes and musicians were all black. Oh, well, they're different. Or, you can easily compartmentalize when it comes to us and our voices and what we have to say. And I think people need to understand that we are three-dimensional. We're not just what we're saying or how we're delivering it and whatever else. Maybe listen to the substance of what we have to say, because we've been crying out forever. F the police beating us up, the ghetto, all of our conditions and things of that sort. People, they listen, but they don't hear. They're not actually taking in the information to where they can say, oh, okay, well, they're crying out that they're getting targeted by police, or they're crying out that, policies have redlined communities to where we're not getting the same amount of education, access to loans and housings and things of this sort. We've always been kind of getting this point across in our music. You look back at the Public Enemies, the X-Clans, the Ice Cubes, even NWA, on and on. We've always been trying to tell these stories, but, it's been getting heard and disseminated and all across, and we're selling platinum records and things like that. But are they listening? Have they given weight to what we've said? And to find ourselves decades later after F the Police came out and we're still saying F the Police, that tells you right there that the substance of what we had to say have been glossed over and overlooked. So now we have to, reevaluate, okay, what's the power in our message? And you come across these cyclical things where, okay, we used to have conscious rap. And now we just have strip club rap or whatever the case may be. So we go through these cyclical points in music. And right now we're kind of being dominated by, I guess, Atlanta, that subculture of music that you would play in the strip club or whatever the case may be. And that's kind of taken away a little bit from the movement of our voices, because I couldn't give you a lyric from one of those songs, even though I listened to them. You know what I mean?
Right.
But if you took me to a Public Enemy or something like that, I can run things down to actually what was said, or Tupac and things like that. So I think, it's kind of both sides. From an audience standpoint, can you listen to the stories being told? And from an artist standpoint, what are you disseminating with your message? You don't have to have all message type songs. Have fun. Right, strip club song, whatever the case may be, but have some substance to go along with it. There's a lot of different ways to tell a story. And even when you're making somebody laugh or cry or get crunk, there's still something that could stick with them. You could put something in the hook or whatever the case may be. There are always ways to make your point. And music is a very strong medium for that. So I think it's incumbent on both sides to kind of look at things differently.
Well, that's actually a perfect segue to getting you out of here. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. There's something we like to do with our guests before we let them go. Ask them their top 5 lists.
It's going to be
start with three. Oh,
it's going to be 3.
Okay, so the first one is your top 5 musicians of all time. We just talked about music, so let's hear your top 5 musicians of all time. Personally.
So I don't know what my top 5 says about me. Maybe I'm weird. So I guess 1 and 1A, Prince and Michael. Mm-hmm. Michael was my favorite in my youth, but as I've grown and appreciated musicality and everything that goes behind song making and the process, I've become more of a Prince fan. So Prince is 1, Michael is 1A.
Okay.
After that, it gets kind of all over the place. Frank Sinatra, Nina Simone, Sade. Sade got me through war. This was back when it was a cassette tape. I played it so much it broke. I had to buy another one.
Yeah.
And number 5, and I don't really like to put him at last, Public Enemy.
Yeah.
So that's my top 5.
I love that list. I love that list.
Now the second one is your top 5 athletes.
Athletes.
Yes.
Number 1, Muhammad Ali.
Yes.
Muhammad Ali's my icon, idol. Never got to meet him. He's the one person, if I met, I would make sure I take a picture. I've met all kinds of celebrities, athletes, actors, didn't take a picture with him.
Got a picture.
If I would have, because it's kind of against the rules anyway.
Yeah.
As a journalist, you can't take a picture with people, but I wouldn't care about the rules. If I would have ran across Muhammad Ali, I've taken a picture, autograph, I don't care.
Right.
He's my number 1. Mm-hmm. So after Muhammad Ali, I'll have to go with. That's a tough list. Arthur Ashe, Quiet Tiger Woods. When he opens his mouth, I regret it. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and I have one more, right?
That's 5. That was 5 right there.
That was 5? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, one more. Serena.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Cool.
And the last one, one thing that's brought us together is your love and our mutual love for travel. So
I love traveling.
The top 5 places that you visited in your lifetime.
So top used to be Paris, but it's been replaced by Peru. Went to Lima, Peru. Yeah, Lima, Peru. And I went to Machu Picchu, but also hiked Rainbow Mountain. For listeners out there, most people don't know. They know about Machu Picchu, but they don't know about Rainbow Mountain. Please Google Rainbow Mountain. It will change your life.
Wow.
It's 17,000 feet above sea level. It's like 30 below at the top. When you get to the top, the feeling of accomplishment that you will feel and the rush that you will feel for this appreciation of life and what God has created and just your place in the world. I don't think I'll ever be able to replace that. I did that last year. It was an experience of a lifetime. So that's my number 1 now. Second place is Cuba.
Yeah.
Went to Cuba finally 2 years ago. What can I say about Cuba? Just the people, the food, the history. And it feels like it's, if you ever imagine getting in a time machine and going back in time, that's what going to Cuba feels like. The cars, the architecture, just even the mindset of the people.
Feel safe too, right?
Yeah.
Walk around.
It's fantastic. So Cuba, and I hate that we can't go back.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that'll change because I definitely want to go back. And as soon as quote unquote outside open back up, I'm going to go back to Peru because they have a desert oasis called Huachaca. There's literally a desert oasis. So surrounded by miles and miles of sand, there is an oasis in the middle of that. And we couldn't go because there was weather conditions and we couldn't quite squeeze that into the Peru trip. So I literally want to go back for that. So next on the list would be Colombia. And I almost relocated to Colombia. I love Colombia. It's a perfect marriage of modern and throwback. Also technology towards beautiful landscapes. There's literally mountains in the distant view, things like that. Very strong focus on family. Your dollar goes very far. So for listeners who've never been to Colombia, I highly recommend visiting Colombia. It's not what you think as far as Pablo Escobar and all these other things.
Yeah.
They've driven that out. Trust me, it's gone. It's moved to Mexico. And then lastly, Italy. I'm a foodie. I'm a self-proclaimed food porn addict. So when I love to travel, the first thing I do is look up where I should go eat or what restaurant I should visit or what's the cuisine and things like that. So Italy has the best food on the planet to me.
I always ask you when I go places.
Yeah. I mean, I love Italy, the food, the people, fashion. I mean, whatever you're into, you'll find it in Italy. So those are that's my top 5.
That's a good list, man. Yo, seriously, thank you so much for joining us, man. This has been exceptional, man. We have a lot of other questions that we probably could have asked you.
We'll definitely have to have you back on.
We're gonna have to have you back.
Hey, anytime.
Yeah,
Love what you guys are doing.
Appreciate it, man. You have a good one. Be safe and take care of that family of yours.
All right, will do. Happy Juneteenth.
Right, take care.
All right, man.
Peace.
Love the Pilot Boys podcast? Support us on Patreon. Supporters can pledge as little as $1, and we have some cool perks on there. Check out www.patreon.com/Pilot Boys podcast. Show us some love today.
That's all we have for today's show. Big thanks to our guest, Maurice Bobb. Thanks to everybody for listening. Don't forget, sharing is caring. Subscribe to the Pilot Boys podcast on Apple, Spotify, Patreon, and YouTube. And please follow us on social media at Pilot Boys Pod on Twitter, and at Pilot Boys Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. And follow the host on Twitter. I am at Mechadon Music, and V is at Swan. And don't forget to grab some Pilot Boys wristbands at shop.pilotboys.com.
Always remember, be you. You is fly.
Pilot Boys out.
Pilot Boys